Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of DevHops. I'm Bryan Finster, and Tracy Bannon couldn't be here with us this evening, but I do have my friend Vilas
Hey,
talk.
Bryan.
So,
For those who don't know me, I'm Vilas, and I am the Senior Director of Developer Experience at Build.com.
Vilas, we always start up these things with what we're drinking because we're meeting at the bar so we can have real conversations. So what are you drinking this evening?
I am drinking a Kenyan small batch coffee that I recently bought. And this one is really good because I don't like acidity in my coffee.
Hmm.
So this one is really nice. It's easy on the palate, and I love it after lunch. So there we go.
Well, I'm remembering a vacation actually a company meetup slash vacation I took recently to San Diego, and I'm drinking a Liberty Call Special Reserve bourbon,
Nice.
a local distillery in San Diego in my Death Star tumbler here. So I'm ready to go.
That's what I'm talking about. Death Star Tumblr. That's where it's at.
So, Villas, what are we talking about today?
So I was thinking about platforms. What does it mean to us? So
Yeah,
let's talk about platform.
yeah, I think platform's near and dear to both of our hearts. For me, a platform, number one, as a developer, I can't think of a better job as a developer than to work on platform development because my job is to make other developers' jobs easier. That's what I see as a platform's role is to make it easier for other people to do work more effectively. What about you?
Yeah, I think platform is mainly supposed to be about removing obstacles for developers, right? We've mentioned this before, irresistible developer experience.
Yeah,
Those words mean something for developers who work on it day in and day out, right? Getting out of their way by providing them something that's easier than not doing it is what I think about platform, right? Um, what do you feel about platform as it's defined in organizations today? Do you feel anything about that?
well, I think that much like DevOps, that it's a massively overloaded term with no real distinct definition.
What about the size? Let's talk about the size of platform and the scope of platform, right? Um, if you will, like, let me think a little bit back about when I started working, right?
Yeah.
There used to be this very small set of maybe two engineers
Mhm.
that would work on a very small library called like a common library, right? Every one of us would then use that or pull that in as a dependency, and then you would get a set of things that are common to the entire structure of the company, like logging, monitoring, etc.
Yep.
Maybe a few other things, right? And then that's it. That small library, which was a mini package, would get released every specific cadence, and then that's it. That was our common, and then that team started growing. Did you have anything like common?
I've worked in several places where we had some common libraries, and the pattern that I saw was that you'd have these common libraries that problem people had solved problems early on, but there wasn't like a dedicated team for it. These were just orphaned code out there that people just used or eventually just stopped using.
Hmm.
That someone had contributed something, it had spread in the organization, and then it just spreads through inertia. It's got problems, but nobody owns it enough to fix it. And then eventually people get tired of it and just stop using it entirely, or just write replacements for it, or fork it and start fragmenting things. That's honestly been my experience where I've worked. I'll tell you, the first job I had, we had no platform area. It was just things like that, little tools
Yeah.
people are just using.
When do you feel that transition happened, but from being something that people worked on common to being a team, and then maybe an organization or a function? When did that come about? I feel
Hmm.
like I saw that transition in the last maybe decade, where it became more of a function.
Well, but in my career, we've moved from you were a full stack developer because you could do everything in database and the one language you're in, right? I mean, that's where I started, and that was included UI because you're coding green screen in
Right.
C, you're doing backend in C, everything's in C.
Yep.
And so you're a full stack developer. The tools were right? I mean, the tools were super simple, but I think as the technology on how we build software, the number of technologies we have to use just to build things, plus the technologies to deliver them, as those have grown and become more complicated, I think that's when that transition started happening, right? You started seeing, okay, well, we need to remove some of this complexity off the team, so we need to create another team to handle that complexity.
Do you feel that it was because of the lowering of complexity, or like here is one aspect that I saw, right? That really grew in the last decade.
Yeah.
It was the interest to keep up with industry standards without having to have every team invest in it, right? So the complexity of the existing code base was one thing, but then it was like, oh, we want to get to the next big thing, and can someone lead the way on that? And can you give us some abstractions on it or something like that? And it became one of the ways that people would approach something like the cloud, right?
I haven't been fortunate enough to work for many places where they were trying to make sure they're up to date with the industry.
I would say like, I would 100% of the cases were not that way. But I have seen that a lot of times this was the argument used by leaders who would be like, hey, we can't do this because look, platform doesn't support it or something like that, right? It became also a way to do that. And which is why I always believe this, and maybe it's a conditioning thing now because of so many years in platform, but I always believe that platform teams need to be 6 to 8 months ahead of where their internal developers, customers essentially are, right? Because they have to know, hey, this is what's coming. I need to know what it is so I can advise you on it if I can.
Well, I think that you said a few key words that are important
Sure.
to understand is the developer customers.
There you go.
Right. And I think there's two different directions I've seen platform areas go in organizations. One is they're customer focused, right? It's like, how do we help our customers, and how do we stay ahead of what their needs are and that sort of thing. The other one I've seen is, okay, those stupid developers, we need to keep them in line, right? Platform is police, or even just apathy. Oh yeah, someone told us to build a thing, so here's your Jenkins pipeline, so leave us alone, right? I've seen that as well. Not personally, I have talked to people who that's the experience, right?
Sure, yeah.
I think all of those all of them actually can become problems. Even we want to help you because we go out of control. I think that's what we're talking about, some of the problems, right?
Yeah, so developer as a customer. So that is actually a very crucial thing, because we listen to customers when they are external, when they're paying us money, right? When it affects our revenue, we should be listening to our internal customers as well, right? It's the same concept. It just feels that one of them just seems like you can ignore them, right? Most often, obviously, you don't want to ignore the external customer, but most often the customer that gets ignored is the internal one, because they're not going to have another option to find. They can't just walk out of the building and go work for someone else. Some of them do, but not everyone can.
I think both of us have seen situations where we believed that there was no other option, but there actually were options. It's just that the workarounds weren't obvious, and people were just working around the platform, right?
Yeah. And that's okay. So now that actually brings us to the point that we started making, like, what is platform and how does it grow? My sense is that over time with different industries, right? And I've worked in many places where the platform team starts off with a smallish charter, and then eventually that charter starts creeping out into, oh, let's control this and that and the other. And that can be worrisome because, one, you may take on a lot of high priority tasks, right? Which are all important for the company to survive and to grow. And second, you may not have 100% of the talent, and you will never have that, right? You always need to draw in that talent from the rest of the developer community inside the company. So let's talk a little bit about that, because I think there is a lot of important discussions hidden inside that.
Yeah, that can also cause a problem when you start trying to draw in internal talent, right? Is that, I talked to a platform engineer from ExxonMobil years ago. We were at DevOps Enterprise Summit. We were having discussion over beer, and he said, I've noticed that a lot of the top developers migrate to platform because they're closer to their customers. But that can also cause a lot of internal strife and political problems, right? When you start attracting people and you get accused of poaching.
Yeah.
But the other problem is, why do we have to keep growing? And this is what we're talking about, right? There's got to be a size at which we're being effective at helping solve the problems. But are we doing it in a smart way so that we're doing massive force multiplication instead of having to continue scaling the size of platform as we scale the number of problems we're solving for the business? Right. Yeah. This is what the real problem that I see a lot of places is there's not enough emphasis on, okay, we have 10 people. How can we do 10 times as much help with not adding anybody else?
And that's I think I would actually go so far to assert that platform doesn't need to solve everything, right? It
doesn't need to solve everything. I agree.
Yeah.
Right. And let's circle back to the idea of federating it, right? It's like, okay, why do we need a platform team at all, right? Why couldn't it just be volunteer contributions of people saying, hey, we're going to add this tool in, right? There's some, it seems like some real positives there, but I see all sorts of problems cropping up from that.
Yeah, we touched upon this, right? Like removing obstacles from your path, from a developer's path is crucial. So you do need platform teams that can provide that force multiplication. You do not want every developer to worry about it and solve that problem. So you have one set of people solving those common problems, providing you with a templatized, easy to use way, and then everyone can sort of use it because they don't have to worry about it. They don't have to go through the same pain that a pioneer did, right? Someone in the platform is probably a pioneer solving that path. They find the route and they now say you can walk on it. Here is where it gets challenging. Here is maybe where I want to talk more about, right? How do you now invite others to say that you can also help in this exploration instead of closing off those contributions and becoming eventually an ivory tower where you're screaming instructions at people like, hey, this is wrong. I call that this is wrong. Like I command that you do this, which is what eventually that it can become. So I want to try and move from, like you said, federation. I understand the idea of federation, but I want to move it towards how do you make a call for folks to come in and actually share that?
Well, let's make sure that everybody else is clear what we mean by federation, right? I mean, what we mean by federation is here's a set of tools and anybody can just go and contribute, say, oh, here's another tool and here's how to use this tool, right?
Yep.
So everybody just kind of, it becomes a dumping ground for whatever nifty widget someone wants to add, right?
Yep.
That's what we're talking about by federation.
So there is another word that I sometimes use for this, which is inner sourcing, right? The idea,
not federal, but this is different from federation, right? Now we're moving.
Yes, it's different from federation. It's a little bit more. It's a way to invite people in. So the reason I'm bringing this term up, right, Bryan, is because I believe there is a very tight, dependency, being able to federate in a way that you are essentially asking contributors to come in and help, and that, in my mind, is sort of closely tied with inner sourcing.
Well, and there's one thing I think before we go off to inner sourcing, I think there's one thing we want to touch on, right, which is that platform has two primary customers. One is all the teams you're trying to help, but the other one is the organization.
Yes.
And I gave a talk at PlatformCon recently. One of the things I talked about was that platform's job is also to implement the guardrails to keep us safe, to make sure that everything we deliver meets our compliance policies and meets our security profile, right? And that you don't want everybody to have to go and figure that out, and you don't want to have audits spread everywhere auditing everybody, right? And so you need that in place. In my view, you have to have a centralized team. But to your point, to make sure that we're tightly working with the platform customers and getting the best of what we can deliver while meeting those organizational goals, right? I mean, that's what you're talking about with inner sourcing. Yes.
So let's separate two things out. So I think you point out a very good thing, which is security. So yes, security is one big use case. Can we separate out security with non-security related features?
Oh, sure. Well, and I use security and compliance as two separate things.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Sure.
But you have to have a team who is making sure that our tools are keeping us safe from a security and compliance point of view.
Is that the security in addition to a platform and individual developers, or I think
No, I'm saying
the
that
way you say it is individual developers themselves are essentially enabling themselves using tools from platform.
the platform has guardrails baked into it to help us stay secure. That's the tooling. The tooling is ensuring that we're secure.
So let me ask you this, right, Bryan? You talk about platform becoming sort of a policing authority, right? But then we do use terms like guardrails.
Yeah, but guardrails, you have a guardrail around the cliff. That's not the police, right? You're not going to get arrested. You just don't.
Okay, fair. Fair. No, but this is important, right?
Yeah.
Because the idea of guardrails. Okay, so maybe I'll use this other word, gating, right? Gating and guardrails. These terms tend to convey a sense of policing, right? When they are not necessarily. It's basically sometimes preventing you from sort of, like you said, like it's preventing people from falling off a cliff because there is some guardrails around it.
Yeah, and we mean safety nets, right? We mean things to ensure that we can stay safe while moving as quickly as possible at the same time.
Yep.
Right? Things that will prevent us from doing things that will harm ourselves.
So let me ask you this. Yeah. How does federating that, the controls for that, helping if someone decides to change the nature of those guardrails fundamentally?
Yeah, see, I don't think federating does. I think federating makes that incredibly difficult and even dangerous, right? I think we should really look at what you're talking about inner sourcing and see how inner sourcing align with that idea of having a central source of truth for this is our organizational norms for security and compliance.
Okay, so that is okay. So that is what I was chasing. The reason I was sort of taking you on this path is, it is my belief, or at least in practice, I've seen this happen quite often, is that unless there is a sense of ownership or a sense of contribution, the amount of the number of folks rather that are using the solution or really sort of including it in their everyday is not that high. So they have to feel that passion, they have to feel that ownership towards it. And that is one way that inner sourcing, in my opinion, can actually help solve it.
Yeah, so let's pull that thread for a minute. Okay?
Let's do that.
Inner sourcing is something that I in previous organizations have tried to promote. Hey, you're using my application internally.
Yep.
Please contribute, right? But the problem is that I found is that people are very, very busy, right? And why are they going to contribute to my thing? I would say I've even done things like hand out stickers, right? If you contribute, the only way you're going to get the sticker for your laptop is if you contribute change, right?
Oh yeah.
Engineers
love swag, by the way.
They do. People will work really hard for stickers, especially.
I would do that. Yeah, right? For sure. Yeah.
But I've really struggled getting people to contribute anything at all. I mean, have you seen anything to help make it to pull that passion out of people? I mean, other than the people who are just like super excited, right?
I think we sort of nailed it in the sense that, like, that swag example, I'm just going to expand on that. Yeah. People love that recognition, right? They appreciate the recognition. Everyone understands and accepts when someone is called out for the recognition or someone is given a certain incentive, right? So incentivizing people to be able to do that is hard, but it can be done. And the way that I have seen it work briefly in my past role is with titles. I mean, they could be fake titles, but they mean something in the context of inner sourcing, right? So if you had like just for the sake of discussing this, let's say you had something like a silver contributor or a silver, gold, and platinum status for these contributors who are, they're contributing to the code. Maybe at a higher level, they're contributing to reviews, right? At some point, maybe they're contributing to the architectural changes or suggesting architectural changes in platform itself. These are people that you can create these are not hobbyists, but these are people who are going to be incentivized both as a sort of a title or a reward given to them, as well as in the actual practice in terms of their real job, they also get some brownie points for it, right? In whatever way possible.
Well, in the talk I gave at PlatformCon, the thrust of my talk was how to build platform as a product. And I think we should talk more about that later on.
Yes.
But in a typical product model, what you have is you've got product owners going out and doing customer outreach and understanding what the customers do. The real strength I see in the thing that you're talking about is that it's a much more tightly integrated approach to not only are you asking the customers what they want, but the customer saying, here's what I want, and here you go, here it is, right? Do you think that this is good for, well, but
let me ask you this, right?
This is something else that we should talk about, though. So how do they know what things we're looking for?
Yes, so that brings us to the point. So remember, I remember this time when we used to have completely public roadmaps. When I say public, I mean within the company, roadmaps for the product, the platform product, that were displayed and openly visible to everyone.
Yeah.
So they could comment on it and they could sort of give us feedback. Exactly. Yeah. So these are our priorities. These are the items you'll be working on this quarter, right? And if you feel this is different from what you want prioritized, come talk to us. It's a completely open forum. And then whatever is the right reflection of priorities gets reflected there. You can take that one step further, Bryan, and even make that a sort of a voting model or a weighted model where people get a certain number of sort of chips they can lay at the table, and then they bring in that and they say, hey, this is what I want to spend my money on or spend my investment on for platform. And then that is how your sort of priorities get routed. So transparency is key if you want to call people to help you sort of with the product. So in order for platform to succeed as a product, you would have to treat it in every way like a product. You would have to make sure there is a roadmap that the customer knows, appreciates, and signs off on in some meaningful way, right? They say, yes, this is what we are looking for, or this is not what we're looking for. Instead, we want this. And the customer then has some kind of a stake in it. In this case, the only way it's special is that you're now inviting them saying, hey, if you know this better, come help us out, and then we'll solve this together.
Yeah, and roadmap is a real loaded phrase, and I've seen it used a lot as a task list, which is different from what we're talking about, right? We're like, these are problems that we need solved.
Exactly. Yeah.
Hard problem, like we don't have a software bill of materials capability right now.
We should be clear. We are not talking about roadmap as putting Jira tickets on a on a timeline. No, that's not what we're talking about.
This is the prioritized list of problems we need to solve.
Exactly.
And like a software bill of materials. We don't have a SBOM right now, and somebody help us with this, and you can get like 10 points, or we need a tweak over here to solve this. We're not as optimal on pipeline speed over here as we'd like, and you'll get 2 points for that or something. That's what you're talking about.
That's what I'm talking about. I think I have definitely seen cases where we did the first part well, which was the transparency of priorities. We did that. I think we did that fairly successfully in our past organization. Yeah. But what we did not do was create a good incentive mechanism for contributors to be able to do this as not a hobby, right?
And I think that just giving people stickers they could put on their laptops wasn't enough.
I mean, it did get us far, but it did not get us as far as we could have gone, and that requires. I think that's where. So just to go back to a little bit to the point of platform being too big, small, etc. Right? Yeah. The right sizing of platform is hard, and it's hard because you do not have a very good, dependable task force like this. You do not have a dependable task force of people who would raise their hand and sign up for this kind of work. The reason why you don't have such people who can raise their hand and sign up for this work is because there isn't a very reliable incentivizing model or a culture that promotes that kind of thing, right? So there needs to be little sort of push or an incentivizing to say, yes, if you do this, guess what, we will treat you like a senior or a staff or a principal. And maybe there is part of that growth involves you contributing to platform.
No, that's what I was going to say was that, let's talk about the stickers for a second, right? The stickers are only valuable to the people who are intrinsically motivated, right?
Yeah.
If nobody else knows what the sticker means, it doesn't mean anything. But if you've got like the leadership of a company recognizing that, hey, here's this month's platinum contributors and hands out stickers to them individually to put in their laptops, so they're a platinum contributor, right? That it's recognized in the entire organization that that's a thing. Those are two different levels of incentives.
Yep.
Because you've got the recognition that leads to bigger things in the future, I think.
Exactly.
You have to balance that because you don't want to incentivize it to the point where they're not actually doing their daily work.
That's true. That's true. Yeah. So
letting their teams down.
That is, I mean, let me be selfish for a bit, Bryan. Like I would love for them to contribute 100% of their time, but yes, there is the other side as well. I have to be empathetic to that part as well. No, but all jokes aside, Bryan, I feel like there is no good definition of that today. I don't think companies have solved that problem until and unless some part of that platform or some part of that innovation goes open source, right? The moment that happens, then you get a really strong contribution model, both internally as well as externally.
If it's a good product, you do.
If it's a good product, you do. Yes, agreed, fair. I mean, but that's a good thing, right? I mean, if you have a good product, guess what? You don't have to go and sort of push for it. Things just organically happen, right? But with that said, going back to, again, the sizing of platform, which is really something that I really care about, is that it is extremely important to define what platform does not do as much as it says this is what platform should do, right? And I think that is, I've seen past experiences in past lives where it's not been defined. So anything and everything, you start with platform and then you go elsewhere. And I suggest that should not be the case. There should be a very easy way for folks to know this is platform and this is not. And that's a hard problem to solve.
Yeah, I think it is. I was actually had an accidental conversation with somebody at a bar on Sunday.
Okay.
We recognized we were both engineers because he does hiking.
Okay.
And has to solve all sorts of problems. It could be life or death in hiking on some of these trails. Off-road motorcycling, it's very similar. You're always problem solving. And we were comparing notes on that and realized we were both engineers. But he works in a platform area, but it's slightly different. He works in communications platforms. They have a very tight focus. We work on these, Slack,
correct,
Teams, Zoom, those sorts of those also are platforms.
Yes.
With a different focus. I think it's like any other product though, right? And this is something that's really important to me. I don't think people put enough emphasis on platform as a product. Yeah. They think of it as infrastructure. They don't give it the same level of discipline that you would wrap around a product. Well, what is the domain boundaries of this product? Let's assign the domain that this needs to address these capabilities. And that's as big as it needs to be. Now there's things that have to happen inside that product for that to happen.
Do you feel anyone has done that? Do you feel there's anyone that has done it well? Like defining a product boundary for platform.
Yeah.
Do you feel there is anyone that has done that well? Or is there any thought that you have around it?
We've worked together in the past, and I think that while we weren't super explicit about it, I think we really understood what our boundaries were.
I think so. So I agree with you. Here is where I would say we didn't do the right thing, right? Is we weren't explicit on this is what we would never support, or we would never. It should. So I think so. What happened? This is what I feel, right? Is that the ambition of a platform team always eclipses the reality within the team, right? The ambition of the platform team is, oh, we want to be the next big thing, like whatever, we want to be the next cloud provider and things like that. That's how, I mean, that's how big you see yourself. And that's where the fallacy is that you have to realize you don't have what it takes to do that. So you have to be within your means and actually say, this is what we can do, and we can do this really well. But everything else that you see on that list, no, we can't do that. I can't build you a cloud-enabled, like hybrid cloud-enabled thing within like the next 3 months. We can't do that. But what I can do is get you a tool where you can create new users that you can test with, let's say for your website or for your backend system. Yeah, I can do that. That's doable. So I think Bryan, this is where I would say this is one thing I would do better, right? Is I would go back and say, hey, this is something I'm never going to sign up for. Do not consider me a part of that discussion, right? And that is so that we can focus on the few things we really are good at.
Yeah, if this is an organizational goal, we need a separate team to focus on that, right? Because this is our domain boundaries, our context diagram ends here, right?
Yeah, and there is another thing that is attached to this. And I think this is the reason why I didn't probably do this very well is because I ignored the best parts of the existing solutions, right? So and this is something I spoke about at PlatformCon as well, is I realized I won't say very late, but I probably realized it later than I should have, is that there were some things that were working fine that I did not have to platform, right? I didn't have to move it because it was there, it was stable, everything was working fine. And that was another mistake, which is, again, goes back to the point where I said, oh yeah, maybe we'll solve this too. And that is something that I would not ever do, right? And I think platform teams fall into that trap where their ambitions exceed what their current
Well, and I think,
talents are.
let's go back to roadmaps, right? And roadmaps is problems to solve, right?
Yeah.
If we're very disciplined about prioritizing the problems that are causing people pain, so we go back and say, what's the purpose of platform? My job is to remove other developers' pain, right? That's my job, is to make their pain go away, not to make them fall into line.
No.
Make their pain go away and keep them safe while it happens, right?
Yep.
And so what is causing them the most pain? And so let's prioritize that list.
Yeah.
And I think that helps put a check on, oh, I can go and do this. Maybe you might be able to, right? But is that really a priority? Is that really causing developers pain? What's your focus? Making yourself look good or making them look good?
Yes. And that's okay. This is a great learning moment where what we're talking about is directly solved, I feel, by treating developers like real customers, right? And when I say that, I mean that real customers can vote with their choice of, like, in external case, it's revenue. In internal case, it's adoption. They can vote with adoption if this is a solution of choice or not. If it's not meeting their needs, they can vote to not choose to use it, right?
I think that, expanding on that, I think that platform dies as soon as you stop thinking that they have a choice. You may have a push from the very top that says you must use the common platform, right?
Yep.
But as soon as you forget that they actually do have a choice and they can work around you, and stop focusing on their needs and start focusing on, oh, cool, now they have to use our stuff. That's when platform dies. At that point, right? When you stop caring about your customer.
Correct. And I think the size problem also solves itself, where platform teams realize, hey, we don't need to grow beyond this because we are not solving any other problems, right? So we can that results in a leaner, cleaner sort of. I would even go so far as to say not a platform team, but instead it's more of a, let's create utilities, tooling, infrastructure help, whatever it is that you want to call it, right? It becomes more lean, and that creates, and that keeps them very aware of what they can provide, instead of saying, oh yeah, we'll just hire these many people and figure it out, right? And that's not serving anyone.
And people forget that the bigger the organization grows, the slower it goes.
That's right.
They forget that, and having a lean, small group of people who are hyper-focused on the needs of their customers allows them to rapidly pivot to the next pain point.
I'm going to ask you a question.
Sure.
I think I know the answer, but I think this question needs to be asked. Is what would you say to those who call out, hey, we need redundancy of talent, where what if these small, lean group of people are suddenly interested in another job, or they're not available all of a sudden? What happens then to all of the stuff that we wrote?
I actually had this a conversation recently at the team level. Like today, I had this conversation where I was talking to someone who said, I think the ideal size for a team is between 4 to 6 people.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And my response was, I think it's more like 5 to 7. And because then you have enough to be able to absorb the fact that people do move on with life. You don't need redundancy, but inside platform, if you have a big enough organization, that should be broken up into subdomains, right? You're responsible for this piece of the platform, and you're responsible for exactly this piece of the platform. And those teams should be sized to a point where they're small enough to move fast, like with 5 to 7 people, but not so small that when one person leaves, the team just collapses. Right. And that's you're managing at the team level. Make sure the teams are right sized so that they're sustainable, that they can handle life changes without putting everything at risk.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. In fact, I actually feel that there is no difference for a platform team to handle that than any other team, right? So you always want to continue to have minimal, I would say zero tribal knowledge as much as possible, that is just shared by someone that just like whispers it into another person's ear and doesn't share it, doesn't document it, doesn't make it easy for others to onboard. All of those practices that are as relevant in,
You don't want it all up here, that's for sure.
No, right? No, yeah. You want and anything that is relevant for a product team, right? Anything that's relevant to a product team to sustain itself and to succeed, it's the exact same thing. So for anyone who tells me, hey, platform is special, it needs like more, no, it's not. There is exactly, in fact, I would argue the opposite. I would say empower a product team so they can actually accelerate if they need to. But for the most common pain points where repeated pain or something that they are doing again and again that they do not want to expend their time on and doesn't actually help advance their bottom line, share that problem with the platform team and they'll prioritize it based on the needs and then deliver that back.
Well, but and you mentioned another thing that we have to worry about. It's bottom line, right? Platform is 100% expense, right? There has to be an offset level of value to the amount of expense we're spending, right? And you told me before about a number I think we were aiming for that offsetting level of value, right?
So the first thing is platform is always a cost center unless you are monetizing the platform itself.
Right? No, this is true. Yeah, if you have people external to your organization is what you're talking about.
Exactly. However, going back to your point, right? The idea is that platform teams, the way that the budgeting, in my opinion, or in my experience have done in the past, is platform teams, the ROI is 10x expectation, right? Which means you spend $1 on platform, you're getting a return of $10 towards your bottom line, operating costs, savings, whatever, all of those things, right? So it's sort of an investment of that nature. That 10x number is how platform is, and that's why we don't just call it force multiplier. We need to be force multiplier, right? Because that's how we succeed. That number is not how to say, is not out of thin air, right? Like that number usually depends on, or rather showcases to leadership that there are 10 teams who are now having savings for you having spent money in one team. Right. So that's sort of a generic number that we all aim for in our minds when we are thinking about, hey, when we want to write a tool, you do not want to write a tool if it's something that just like one person asks for it. Yeah, it's fine. Like that person you can help them out. You can provide them with technical expertise. You can do all of that good stuff, help them out. But that's not a platform ready product yet. Like for it to be a platform product, you need to see that grow organically as a need. And then you essentially extract that and you sort of create that generic solution for everyone.
Again, we've just talked about product development again. Right? You're not going to do product for one customer unless they're a giant customer. Right?
Exactly. Yeah, it's all about it. All of that comes down to bottom line, right? And when you talk about bottom line, so I think we talked about a bunch of things. I'm just trying to try and see if I can tie some of these together, right?
Yeah.
We talked about how to resource for these teams, right? We talked about one, a federated model where, and then maybe a contribution thing with inner sourcing and all that. That's all about resourcing, right? Um, Roadmap, or we talked about priorities, right? How do we share that? Again, product. So resource, roadmap, and the third thing we just talked about is budgeting, right? So all of these, and then obviously the fourth is whose voice are you hearing constantly is your customer, and give them that value. If you put those together, it 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 makes you feel like you're speaking about any product that's on the market, right? And that's exactly what it is.
Yes, I 100% agree. I think that, having, one of the things that I think is even important, and people focus on the tools.
Yep.
But what else do products do? Products have advocates to help their users, and having that ability to go and interface directly with the users and show them how to use your platform to solve their problems is how you grow that number of people. So you're doing that force multiplication.
Yep.
I mean, you're an engineer working on platforms. Why can't you help other engineers use the platform? Are you using the platform every single day to make sure it's good? Are you eating your own dog food? Are you helping them use it, finding out where the problems are, bringing that back in to improve the platform? People aren't necessarily going to complain. They might just suffer in silence and then tell people how crappy your product is.
Yeah.
Like
That's the, in my opinion, that's the worst feeling you can get, is you have delivered a product that others just don't use because, one, either they don't know about it, or two, your solution was not compelling enough that solved it didn't solve their problem, right? So they didn't know about it. Fine, you can probably like lose a little bit of sleep over it and fix things. But if you solved something and then they're like, yeah, the solution is worthless, that's worse, right? That's essentially, yeah, you're not listening to the customer at that point.
One of the things, and you brushed by this, one of the things that I talked about in my talk at PlatformCon is the importance of branding, right?
Yes.
And that having a brand, it has there's two really important aspects of a brand, right? Number one, that's my brand, right? I've said this is my brand. I've got a logo, I've invested in stickers and t-shirts. Every time I talk to you, I talk to you about my brand, right? But it's my brand. I want to protect it. I want it to be good. So that gives me something to reach out for. It's not just, oh yeah, it's infrastructure. No. It's, holocron, right? I mean, it's this thing, right? It's this brand, right? Yeah. And so I want it to be good just because now I have name recognition. I've tied my name to this brand, but you've tied your name to this brand as well. And when you talk about the tool, you can talk about, oh, this tool is good or this tool is bad. You can name the tool and people know what you're talking about. And having that brand out there, I think, is, I don't think people put enough emphasis on how important that actually is emotionally to people, because the emotions matter as well on both sides.
Yeah, it's again, I think this is also ties into that same product mindset.
Yeah.
Right. It's all about the brand. It's about just as much as we care about a company's brand and how the company is viewed. By the way, companies when they lose trust with their customer,
they change the brand. Yeah.
Exactly. It does. It hurts the brand, right? There are companies that have literally changed their names or changed like product offerings, which are no different from what they used to sell previously, just to look cooler or just to look better. So all of those things exist, right? There is a reason why. So here is where we can learn from that, right? Into the platform area, or folks that work on common tools and things like that. It is extremely important to never lose the sight of, if we don't do well, we won't have the ability to deliver this in the future, right? Which is how companies do this today, right? There is a reason why companies have extremely conscientious leadership that basically comes out and says, yeah, this was a mistake, or this was not something that we intended. When is the last time you have seen platform teams come in and admit, oh yeah, this was a mistake. We shouldn't have released this feature. We should have saved you folks time. Instead, we wasted your time.
One of the things that I worked in a platform organization before, that one of the things that made me most proud, that there was an outage and that there was a postmortem after the outage. And the postmortem wasn't filed someplace. It was publicly broadcast. Here's the link to the postmortem, right? To inspire that trust. Yes, we had a problem.
Yeah.
Here's what the problem was in detail. And this is what we're working on right now to address that problem in the future, right? And not some of the marketing crap that you see around things like there's, some credit bureaus in the past who have had incidents and they've just blamed it on people instead of really talking about what the real systemic problems were. But, the organization I was in was like, this was the actual problem, and to inspire that trust, because you're talking to really smart people. You're talking to other developers and they know when you're BSing them.
Exactly.
The transparency and building that trust is part of that brand.
Yeah. So I have found root cause analysis and data that people have posted on the internet like this, right? Like within 6 to 8 hours, right? There is folks who are posting RCAs and saying, hey, this is why we went wrong. We're sorry. But Bryan, going back to my original question, right? How many times has an internal team, do you feel, okay, maybe I've worked at like 5 or 6 different companies, not once has there been a case where someone came in and said, oh, we spent the last 2 years building the solution, but guess what, folks? We were wrong. We shouldn't have done this. We should have done this instead.
Oh yeah, never.
Never.
No, not ever. But this is why I focus on continuous delivery so much. Because they've fallen for the sunk cost fallacy instead of getting feedback on the value of what they're delivering. Right?
Do you feel
I hate that feeling? I don't want to build something for like 6 months and then find out nobody cares.
This is okay. So this is great. You're talking about, so my fundamental assumption about continuous delivery, Bryan, is it stems from humility and self-reflection.
Yeah.
I think without humility and self-reflection, you cannot do continuous delivery.
No, you can deliver crap really fast, but
you can do that, yeah.
But unless you're coming from the mindset of
you can deliver crap really fast. That is correct. Yes.
No, but this is something I push really hard, right? And agile mindset is not some fluffy thing that agile coaches talk about. Agile mindsets, we're probably wrong about everything we do. Either our implementation's wrong, or the need changes, or the idea was wrong.
Yes.
Right. And so everything we're doing around continuous delivery and is core to any product development. We need to deliver small things really fast so we can find out how wrong we are, not so that we can bask in the glory of how awesome you think we are. Right.
So what you just said,
you're good, you're wrong.
Yeah. What you just said is exactly what I think is crucial to being able to admit that. And so to admit that you are going to keep improving and keep learning and changing, and like that is fundamental to that, right? So that is where I had said something previously, right? Where the ambition of a platform team, right? That ambition sometimes motivates pursuit of things like this. Like, you know what, we'll do this for 1 year and we'll see what happens. And that's where CD is not necessarily practiced. It may be followed, but it's not
real. I mean, this is Dave Farley's stuff on this. It's all about, it's science. It's a scientific method, right? We are constantly running experiments.
Yeah.
And with experiments, you're not assuming the experiments that you're right and using an experiment to show how right you are. You're using an experiment to show how wrong you are and where your mistakes are so you can refine your hypothesis.
Yep.
Right? And that's what we're doing. And it goes with platform as well. We think if we bring in this new tool, that we'll get this level of improvement. And so what do? We bring in this new tool, we spend months and months and months putting everything together, and then we tell everyone they're going to migrate to the new tool. And then we don't get the improvement. And all we've done is slow everything down by moving everyone to a new tool instead of, okay, now what's the smallest experiment we can run to find out if we're going to see this improvement, if we should invest in this new tool. Right? And that's just product development 101. And not everybody, the habit in the software is to assume that because we coded it, it's awesome.
Wait, are you saying there is software that has bugs, Bryan?
I'm saying that it doesn't matter if it has bugs or not. That the fact it exists is a bug because no one wants it.
There you go.
Right? And so, you have to if you're going to be a good software engineer or doing anything in product development,
Yeah.
you have to start with the assumption that it's probably crap.
Yeah.
But I have an idea that it might not be crap. Let's go find out.
Yeah. I mean, I would say that my feelings are not exactly like what you're saying. Yeah, but I can tell you that the one thing I would agree with you, right, is the idea that what we are putting out today has to be improved, and there is always ways to. There's always more to do. There's always more to learn. There's always things that move, right? It could be, like you said, it could be the basis of the idea itself. It could be why we are doing it. It could be the customer's need. Lots of things, right? The one thing that doesn't change, Bryan, for me, is the constant idea behind what is the value or the multiplier on this, right? So, for example, what doesn't change is if we create this tool, however we create it, however it delivers, however it looks, all of that, it still provides the value. The value should not be diminishing over time, right? If the value diminishes over time, your job as a platform engineer, developer, whatever, is essentially also diminishing over time, right? So that is something that to be very careful about.
Yeah, and so that goes back to, we want to make sure that we're not growing to the point where we're spending way more money than the value we're bringing.
That's right. That's right. Yep.
We need to have sustainable growth with the minimum amount of growth to meet the need of the organization.
Yep. Yep. Exactly. So, I mean,
just
yeah,
like any other product, right? You can't say, oh, we're enterprise funded, so we get to do whatever we want.
exactly. Yep.
You have to.
There is always someone to answer to.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to move to get my power because my laptop's running out of it. All right. Done. Change management.
Yes.
There we go. All right. We're good to go. So let's call out something else here, right? We talked about platform as a product.
Yeah.
Is there any place where you would not consider or not want platform as a product that is optionally to be worked on, instead be mandatory? What is the size of platform at which you would say we cannot go below this size?
When you say we can't go below this size,
what would you say the minimum amount of platforming any company has to do, right? We've talked about the size of platform being not huge and all that, right? But let's take it the other way, right? What is your minimum? What is the bare minimum?
I think it very much depends what environment you're working in. I mean, are you in a regulated environment or not a regulated environment, right? I mean, there's if you're in a regulated environment, there's some things that you definitely want to consolidate and centralize as fast as possible around those regulations. That's the minimum thing, is we want to make sure we're meeting the regulations in a way that doesn't require you to do stupid things like change advisory boards where people are going to go inspect after everything's done to make sure you're meeting regulations, right? I mean, how do we keep people safe so that they can make changes all the time and still stay within the boundaries of the laws we work in, right?
Sure.
If you're not in a regulated environment, I think it very much depends at what point you say we have to do this. But I will say that the smallest organization I've seen that used a platform team to great effect there was about 4 product teams and a platform team of about 2 people. And started with a platform team at ground zero to be a force multiplier, so those product teams didn't have to figure out things on their own while they were standing up this new tooling. And so I saw that to be very effective.
Okay, so that's in sort of the number of people and maybe security or something that's very
well. Yeah, so security as well. I mean,
right?
And so if you're trying to make sure that we all have the same standards of security, you need somebody curating that and making that into the tooling.
Fair.
That does not take a huge organization to get that done. It takes a small team, right? But I think security, especially when I started in my career, security was not a big issue. Now it's an issue for everybody all the time, and it's the scariest quality aspect there is out there because it changes rapidly. Nothing else does. But you want to make sure that you've got these things covered.
let me ask you this way, right? Okay, so maybe I'll share my thought. My thought, Bryan, on this is the minimum that I feel a platform part of section or some team that says common tools, right, should do is be able to provide a fast lane to production that is maintained so it's like building roads, right?
Yeah.
The road has to still be built by someone so you can conduct business by traveling on it, right? I always think about the interstate highway system, right? The interstate highway system had to be built to promote the level of commerce that eventually exploded using it as the basis, right? So that's how I think about it. So for me, that minimum in my mind, Bryan, is that pipeline, right?
No, so I would, but I don't think everybody starts. I would agree that everyone should start that way. Right?
Sure.
I think that, I always push that if you don't have a delivery mechanism, that whatever you're building is pointless, right? But back in the day, interstate commerce was people walking on deer trails,
There you go.
and they cut their own, right? But they still had to pay taxes at the end of the day, and so you had to have a common thing for that. I think that it's easy to say that we've only got 5 teams, so we don't need a platform team. But again, I saw having a team of 2 or 3 people focused on, okay, how can we make everybody else's life easier, be a massive force multiplier. And this is something I talked about in my talk again, was that, my experience, if you've got 2 teams, you might want to talk about when do we start working on having one group responsible for what's our delivery mechanism.
Yeah.
You can do it the other way.
Yeah.
But eventually what's going to happen is it's going to take a lot of effort to shift course and get people on the interstate highway system.
Fair. Fair. I think that's where a lot of companies, I think, are doing that discussion early, Bryan, now that I see it, right? Like I see a lot of people understanding and appreciating the idea of having well-defined delivery paths to production, something that they don't want to think about anymore. Like I think there is a appreciation for what that provides, but there might be a variety of solutions that they have to say, okay, this is what we want to invest in, make a choice. So I think that's the other part, right? No matter what your choice is on this kind of work, you have to still make a choice, invest in it, and then be great at it by investing continuously in it, right? Like your talent, your sort of software improvements, all of that is built into that so that you build it over time.
But and just like every other product, right? Fall in love with the problem you're trying to solve, not the technology. It's so easy to start falling in love, in platform especially, it's so easy to start falling in love with tools and start going, oh, the grass is greener if we just changed our build system to this other thing over here that's so wicked cool.
Yeah. Every tool, every single tooling, every single sort of, I don't want to use the word platform here, but I want to call it like a service, right? Every single new service that I've seen that comes up, every 2 years, I have either seen migration, rationalization, or sort of decommissioning, followed by sort of brand new features or things like that. So there is a lot of evolution in that area, right? It's inevitable that it'll happen, and it should happen, right? It's when you prevent it, that's when you get all sorts of unhealthy behavior within the company, right? So I completely agree with that. In fact, I think platform more so than any other external facing entity, because external facing entities have a very solid, how to say this, force feature to it, which is you have external investors, external stakeholders, customers, companies that depend on resourcing for delivering some product, etc. With development platforms, it's very straightforward. If developers want to use something new and innovative and you're getting in their way, they're going to find a way around it, right? And then they move, and then you're left in the dust to rot, and nothing is useful coming out of it.
So I think what we're saying then is that you don't want to chase tools for tools' sake, right? You want to make tool choices based off of problems aren't being
problems,
solved,
yeah.
right? But
you have to always be solving the
problem.
problem.
On the problem that we're trying to solve,
Yeah.
not look new, shiny.
There you go. Yep. So I think all of it, if I were to attempt to put everything in place, right? When we see something as a problem, something as a product, then we are still solving for the problem. We're not looking for new and shiny. Like we're not saying here is a new UI that I developed in the latest and greatest whatever JS framework. Instead, you're saying we solved how you wanted to have this flow, right?
Yeah.
That's what we solved for you. So I think that's most important for me. Like if we are talking about platform as a product, all of these things we talked about, Bryan, in my opinion, the MVP, like what is an MVP, right? There is this small setup that you want to prove useful for the customer. The customer's feedback is valuable, and then you start iterating on it. There is a minimum to that. For me, it's sort of that interstate highway system kind of thing. That is your minimum platform delivery product, in my opinion. And then you start expanding it based on what your needs are and what the customer's needs are, rather, right? And then you resource it. You either pull the talent into the team, or you essentially inner source it by creating contribution model and incentivizing model. Eventually, you restrict the sizing by making sure that you're creating public roadmaps, public facing roadmaps, which means you should never be working on something that's not relevant or desirable to the business or to the community. And then eventually that sort of regulates the size of the team, and that keeps that team sane and grounded.
So then what we're saying is that we want to make sure that, number one, we have a product mindset, but even more than a normal externally facing product, we want to make sure we have clearly defined boundaries of we are going to tackle these kinds of problems. And that's all that we try to do. We want to make sure that we tackle that in a way that we are very resistant to growth, right? That we want to have the right amount of people in the organization so that it's sustainable to life change. Right? But we're very resistant to growth unless we can't solve the set of problems we want to solve.
Yeah, that's right.
We want to make sure that we have our organizational norms baked into the platform. So we replace process with automation. Right? We really want to be customer focused. We also want the customers to come help us build it, so that we have an even tighter integration with our customers.
Right.
And incentivize that and recognize them, make sure they're recognized for it. Right. And you know, I think the one thing also I would add to it is that if we're bored because we've solved a set of problems, maybe some of us can go and work on other problems elsewhere in the company instead of just growing the platform by trying to find more problems to solve for the platform and just becoming an amoeba.
Yeah, if someone is bored with where they are with the platform, you're probably not listening to your customer.
Well, no, and I was just
all I'm saying is I understand what you're saying.
We're doing it really well. I'm talking about where we have a
fair.
Yeah, we're doing it.
You could do it. You could do it really excellently well. You could do it amazingly well, but there is always something that bothers us, like customers, where it is not related to how you solve it. Right? You could have solved it really amazingly well, and everyone is used to it. It just does it, and everything is efficient and everything, right? But there is always something else that's bothering a bunch of customers at the same time. And I've seen this for groups or other companies larger than 10 teams, 5 or 10 teams. Like there is always something that's bothering them, right? You don't have to solve the world. And sometimes you can even say, you know what? Now we do not need funding for platform, and then we can sort of channel that funding to other products. And we have done that in the past, Bryan, like in past companies.
And I don't agree. What I'm saying is that it could be that you're in a situation where let's say you have 20, 30 people in the platform area, 50 people in the platform area.
Right.
And we have two choices. We can either go, oh, what other problems can we go solve that no one's worrying about? Or we can say what we need to do is get down to a size where we can handle the flow of problems that are coming in. And and then there's other problems in the company that need solving. We've got these really good engineers guys, you could go make a huge impact over here instead of sitting here and us looking for problems that aren't really going to move the
This
needle.
is why I fear that we have gone to a place where we have defined a platform team, and we have also sometimes reserved them as, oh, they can only solve platform problems.
Yeah.
And that's another thing that I fear we have become is, if we remove that word, they are engineers, right? Engineers can solve problems that are existing anywhere in the company that help them out.
I think one of the problems comes back to the misuse of DevOps, because one of the multitude of definitions I've seen for DevOps engineers is platform engineering.
Mm-hmm.
And guess what? People that say have DevOps engineer get paid more, but it's just product engineering. You're just doing product development.
Yeah, I think that has happened over time, Bryan. I think the idea of platform, DevOps, like all of these terms, which mean a lot on the principle side of things, right? I mean, everyone understands what they are, but are they also pigeonholing these folks into one kind of thing, right? I think that's something that is also worth revisiting. I've seen companies that do it well, by the way. I've seen companies where it's not treated as platform engineering, but these are folks they're engineers who are solving a set of problems that in this case belongs to a common group of people who are complaining about it, right? But it doesn't have to be called platform. It could be called a variety of other things.
No, I've seen that done well too.
Yeah.
Right. Hey, here, that's that guy that wrote that tool over there, but that's not his life.
That's not there. Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's what it'll change. So I think there is evolution already happening towards that. Bryan, I see that a lot, right? I think we have talked about this in the past. The idea behind something like engineering effectiveness, right? What does it mean? Engineering effectiveness is a better way to call problems within the software supply chain than calling it platforming. That's the thing, right? Like there is more solutions there that need to be explored. But I think companies are doing much better today because there is a recognition about what is it that the customers need, and hence what do the developers need, and hence what the platform needs to build. So I think that's happening a lot more. What I do feel needs to be protected is the sizing of it, right? How far do you go? How less do you do? Like those limits have to be defined, and based on that, resourcing and hence budget and all of the roadmap and all of that stuff comes together. And that's why it is really important to treat it like a product. So
Yeah,
I think I'll agree with that.
Yeah, be disciplined, right? It all
Yes.
comes down to, we have this list of problems we're trying to solve.
Yep. And I would say one more thing to add to what I've been saying is, like, ambitions need to be in check, right? That is my biggest concern, is when someone dreams up, hey, this is what we can do and achieve, it needs to be in line with what the customer wants, what you can deliver, right? Those two things are super crucial. So yeah, that's what I feel. I mean, I feel a lot about platform, but this is what I feel today. Let's put it that way.
I agree. Customer focused, right? Solving the problems. And
Yep.
We're all just engineers, guys.
Yeah, it is engineering. Yes.
And be kind to your fellow engineers. Be the platform you'd want to use.
There you go. That's a good note to end on.
Well, and with that, Vilas, I'm actually just now out of this awesome bourbon.
Awesome.
I thank you so much for this conversation. I think that this has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, definitely. And thanks for asking me. Thanks for asking me my opinion. I have a very opinionated mind, but I don't choose to share it like with everyone. So I definitely appreciate this chance.
I think I'm probably more open about sharing that I have opinions.
Yes, I have seen that.
But no, I appreciate this. It also helps me flesh out some ideas as well. When I'm talking to people about these things, and so, I hope other people found this conversation fun. But if they didn't, it doesn't matter, because I just really enjoyed the time. So.
Cool, man. It was great fun talking to you, Bryan.
Yeah, you too.
Take care, man.
with everybody, watch out for our next episode, and probably Tracy will be back, and we'll see who else we get to talk to. So, thanks very much.
See ya.